and and during our lives, we meet people that you just know are part of your family. And Reverend Marianne is one of those people that my husband and I met her at the Church of Religious Science in Northern Virginia 20 years ago, more. I don't remember. And
forever.
You go beyond time, space, but it's always been that she was always just connected. It was just the way it is. And I'm sure you've had those kind of experiences as well. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. There we go. And I just want to start with my assignment, if you will. And Reverend Marianne and I went to a I Can Do It. I think it was an I Can Do It in Orlando, probably. And we were sitting there side by side, and Dr. Joe came out on the stage, and all I could do was just go, oh my God, he's finally here. He's finally shown up. And so while I had seen his name for a couple years, maybe, I was so thankful just to be sitting there. So Reverend Marianne and I shared this space and just listening to Dr. Joe talk. And I think for me, I really want to find out from all of you, what information can I give you? Do you have specific questions, or should I go ahead and go through and talk and then just say, raise your hand, let me know if you have a question? Because how can it's just like I could talk about Dr. Joe and all the stuff, and then it just morphs into more and more and more stuff. But I do want to say that for many of us, we are naturally curious beings. That's who we are. If we hadn't been naturally curious, we wouldn't find ourselves in religious science or in new thought. We just wouldn't. And we also embrace affirmative prayer. We embrace that aspect and know that, well, what else is there to know? And what else can we find out? And then I started with Louise Hay in the early 80s, before AIDS, because I was living in Southern California. And so to say that I started in the New Age stuff, it happened in the 60s. And so I've been there, done that with a lot of people, a lot of things. And I really I just say Dr. Joe is an answer to prayer. I wanted to find out what goes on behind the scenes. What happens when we pray? What happens in our brain when we meditate? What is all of that stuff? And Dr. Joe has shown up and built this huge worldwide tribe of people who are curious, and we want to go deeper into understanding in our own personal experience of what it is. From the way I think about it is going to that God space, or going to the unified field, whatever it is that you want to call that place of creation. And Dr. Joe has really dedicated his life to answering those questions and to using healing energy and holding the vision of the highest, best possible thing. So let me just stop sharing his wonderful picture here and ask if anybody has any specific questions, so I can keep that in mind and have some perhaps other information to add. Anything? Anybody want to? I can change the view so I can see if somebody raises their hand. I don't see any hands raised. Okay, all right. So there's just so much I could talk about with him. It's just amazing. So as I mentioned, I started studying metaphysics back in the 60s. And just to let you know, my first career, I was a dental hygienist for 25 years. I went back to school, regular university school, for another 10 years and got my PhD in toxicology. And so I'm a hardcore scientist. That's true. I want the facts. But I'm also a spiritual investigator. I have science and spirituality, and some of the most spiritual people I've met were chemistry professors. So there is a place where we come together, and Dr. Joe really helps in that regard to find out and to do things. So he is an author. He has a number of books. The first, Are You the Placebo? So I read that book so long ago, I don't really remember any of the details. Sorry. What can I say? Oh, and so after Reverend Marianne and I saw him at that event, then I got in the bandwagon right away and took the progressive class, and then started in the week-long things. And I've been to weekend events and all of that. And so much of what he talks about reinforces the things that I have learned along the way from studying with spiritualist ministers and astrologers and oracle card readers and all the stuff with religious science and becoming a practitioner. And so he's just pulled a lot of these things together and expanded in on them. So I thought, for main points, what I do is I would try and encapsulate a few ideas that Dr. Joe puts forth and that are very much in alignment with religious science. And I think the people who have been studying religious science and New Age philosophy have a much better understanding when they start listening to Dr. Joe. So thoughts, beliefs, and actions. Dr. Joe talks a lot about those things in the first couple of chapters of his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. There's also mind, body, soul, or spirit. And those things, some people have different definitions for those too. Dr. Joe really takes you deep into meditation. And he's done studies and brain scans to watch what happens in the brain when people go into different levels of meditation. He does talk about the unified field because he's into quantum physics. And in that, I claim affirmative prayer treatment, and he uses much of that same process in a way. So let me just jump in here with, I think most of us are familiar with the idea that thoughts create feelings, and feelings create behavior, and behavior reinforces thought. So we get a complete cycle of things that are going round and round. And Dr. Joe, especially in the book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, talks about how, let me see if I put together a bunch of little things here. So when we are in the process of interpreting an event, and then our brain, inside of our brain, which is not mind, which is the brain, this organ in our head, releases certain neurochemicals. And those neurochemicals and hormones then circulate in our body. And then we get used to or accustomed to how our body feels based on the hormones and neurochemicals that are generated in the brain. And then our body sends back signals to the brain, right? And then the brain interprets all of that and is able, through its amazing computers, to do what it needs to do to send out more neurotransmitters are created, signals in the brain are created. And so what Dr. Joe talks about is, over time, your physical body, because we get used to how that body feels, is really directing the show. it's gotten into a place of control versus us thinking about something that's gone on, creating that memory, and then the brain releasing the hormones and creating neural pathways. So if you've ever been in a situation where you've made a change, and sometimes this happens when we're doing treatment and we want a behavior to change or something to go on, or if you've gone on a diet or something, and then you say, my body just doesn't feel right. Something's not right. I just don't feel like myself. Must be what I'm doing. I should stop doing this new thing I'm doing and go back to what I was doing because my body felt normal that way. And he says, you know, you got to expect this. If you're changing your thoughts and changing your behavior and doing something different, your brain is going to be sending out different messages to your body, and your body will feel different. It's on its way to changing. It's just, we have to understand that that's part of the process. So if you don't understand that the different feeling in your body is just because your different pathways are being created, different hormones are being released, then, you know, start paying attention, because that's part of what is going on. I never want to ignore good medical advice or to ignore symptoms that you're feeling. But in general, just to be aware that as you change your thinking, as you change your behavior and you change your life, your body will feel different. It's the way it is. So this thoughts have energy. And I don't know how many people are familiar with Mike Dooley and thoughts are things. And that's general philosophy in religious science. Thoughts are things. You change your thinking, your life changes. And Dr. Joe has said, hey, this is how come it changes. This is how come your body feels different. This is how come other things start happening. So Dr. Joe says all thoughts carry an energy or a frequency. I just wanted to show you another picture of Dr. Joe. He's so good. He's just so casual. He's up there on the up on the stage and he's doing his thing, and he's just he's looking at everybody because he sees beyond what most people see. So anyway, he says that our body has gotten in control. And if you ever want to think about this, you know, the mind-body problem is the brain will say, get up, and the body says, nope, not happening, right? So he does spend quite a bit of time in a week-long event talking about the mind-body connection. And then we have mind-body spirit. There's the aspects of the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, and he goes into great detail about these things in his books, and just to see how all of this stuff comes together. So in the beginning chapters of Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, he talked about entanglement and about all of us being connected. And I have a little YouTube clip here because I think I got a whole lot out of watching this little clip. And it helps to explain entanglement so that we can really understand. So if you've ever had the question in your head, how is it that we're all connected? We hear that we're all connected, that we're all one. But how is that? How did that happen? How does that work? So entanglement helps us to understand that. So, good. I hope you can see that. It's only about a minute and a half.
Great granddaddy of wacky quantum weirdness. is entanglement. If time reversal symmetry destroys the notion of time, then entanglement crushes our experience of space. Two objects, two electrons created together, are entangled. Send one to the other side of the universe. Now, do something to one, and the other responds instantly. Instantly. So, either information is traveling infinitely fast, or, in reality, they are still connected. They are entangled. And since everything was entangled at the moment of the Big Bang, that means everything is still touching. Space is just the construct that gives the illusion that there are separate objects. Are we far enough down the rabbit hole yet?
I hope you like that. Yeah, when I said, okay, even though I watched the movie down the rabbit hole, when did that come out, in the 90s? You know, we hear a lot of information. Some of it sticks the first time, and some of it you just need to be reminded. But it is a thing of connected. And in religious science, when you do treatment and you know everything is connected, and that's how come prayer works. Because we're all connected. We go to that, what I call God space. Okay, let me move on. So this scale of some emotions is something that Dr. Joe has in his book. Now, for people who study and listen to Abraham Hicks, there's a very similar scale. And for those who go back to the Hawkins work, this is from the Omega Institute. And you'll notice the Hawkins scale was done using like body language. When you do muscle testing, and to get this scale that relates to a vibration. And in both of these, where we see how a wavelength, a frequency, and I start to think about all of these frequencies as being different strata. So if you've ever seen a picture of something out west where you can, like in the Grand Canyon or something, where you can see different strata, you can see different lines that are separate and discrete. And so I kind of think of this like that. And Dr. Joe talks a lot about wavelength. And so she starts off with these very casual wavelengths, and then moves up. And as you get into, you pass anger. And so anger is a pretty nice wave there. And anger on the other scale is given about a 150. And we start moving up into will. And willingness is about 310. And you get gratitude and appreciation and joy and love and freedom and bliss. And so you move up this wavelength. You move up this scale, and yeah, I know it's tough if you're thinking about not having, assigning something to be higher or lower, you know, about that. But just for the time being, at least, just get it with the wavelengths. And that as you move up in this vibratory scale, when you start hitting this joy and love vibration, then you know things are different. When you're in that vibration of love, and let's get over it, it's not, love is a place in consciousness. Love is not that feeling, emotion, oh, they love me. No. Love is always with us. It's part of us. It's in our divine DNA. It always is, just as joy and appreciation and bliss, it's always within us. It's whether we've tapped into it or not. So if you're if you can remember the old 78 LPs, and you'd put it in the record player, and you'd lift up the needle and you'd take it and you'd put it down on whatever song you wanted to listen to, and you'd pick it up and you'd put it on the next song you wanted to listen to. So it's about tapping in. It's about being able to move the needle. It's always about where you're putting your attention, because where you put your attention is where your energy goes, and wherever you put your energy in your life is what it's expanding. So Dr. Joe talks quite a bit about brain waves, about waves in general, how these things happen, where we go, and how our brain waves fluctuate and change, where the brain waves are originating in our brain, and the different scenarios that happen when you're in different states of awareness. There's so much there. Okay. Dr. Joe also talks about epigenetics, and it's another topic that I think is really important to understand. As a toxicologist, going back to school in the 80s and getting my PhD in 91, 92. Anyway, doesn't matter. Except for science is a lot different now than it was 30 years ago, and it's a lot different than it was 50 or 60 years ago. We know an awful lot now that we didn't know then. So to understand more about epigenetics, I found this little gem, and it's about 2.5 minutes long. Is it okay?
Our genetic code, or DNA, is directed, controlled, and regulated by epigenetic factors which surround and scaffold the DNA in order to orchestrate the cellular mechanisms of life. The epigenome is the collection of DNA, RNA, proteins, and their chemical modifications that alter gene expression without changing genetic code. Discovery research in epigenetics seeks to understand how the environment influences regulation of genes packed within our chromatin, resulting in diseases such as cancer. Epigenetic machinery modifies accessibility of regions in DNA by adding marks to the tails of histones to create epigenetic patterns of chromatin modifications. The addition of an acetyl group to a histone tail changes the electrochemical charge of the histone, causing it to relax and release the DNA. This makes the DNA in that region more accessible to transcription machinery and allows that gene to be expressed. Placing a methyl group on histone tails can either increase or decrease that pattern of gene expression, depending on where the mark is placed. Additionally, placing a methyl group directly onto the DNA results in permanent shutdown of that genetic region. The epigenetic modification patterns of chromatin change during development and differentiation and can respond to environmental changes. When cells are exposed to environmental stimuli, the patterns of chromatin modification can become unregulated as cancer cells hijack epigenetic molecular machinery. More than half of human cancers contain mutations in DNA-associated proteins that are involved in chromatin organization and regulation. Researchers at Simpson Query Center for Epigenetics are studying the role of chromatin biology to develop treatments for diseases such as cancer.
Okay, so let me see if I can take this back to the, all right. Nope. There, right here. Okay, so when you think, sorry about the bottom part, maybe I can get rid of it. Okay, so when you think about inside your cell, inside the nucleus of your cells, is your DNA, and your DNA is 23 chromosomes, right? And so this is what that looks like, 23 pairs. So as if you remember in the visualization here, I thought it was so great. Yeah. So all of this material, your DNA, gets wound up around these histones. And in order for a gene to be expressed, a gene is a section on the DNA, you have to unwind the DNA from the histone so that the rest of the machinery can get in and copy it. And I think we're making some 300 million new cells every day or something. I mean, it's just phenomenal at how our everything just gets so coordinated and says, okay, we need more of this protein. And the message goes through receptors and things on the cell surface. And I know you can find, if you remember drawing those pictures of the cell when you were in school, round circle, nucleus in the middle. I love that, what's his name? I'll think of his name. Anyway, he says, you know, we were told that the nucleus was the brain of the cell. And he said, no, that's just the gonads. That's where the genetic material is. And I say to think about the outer surface of a cell, it's not a smooth, just like a freshly paved highway. No. It's all these cells. And to think of it as more like the outside of a tennis ball, because it has all these little receptors on the outside. And so things happen from the environment, whatever's circulating in our blood, right? And it attaches onto those little receptors, and then it goes inside the cell, and then the message goes and it gets translated into the nucleus of the cell, and then the right part of the right chromosome starts to unwind and allows then for transcription of that section of the gene. So what epigenetics is saying is that there are environmental factors that will either shut down parts of genes or that will initiate different aspects of it. So there's a whole new field of research dealing with how the environment and different things affect what proteins are being made by cells. Whew. That's a lot to take in. So let's go to something easier. So, but it's important to know when people talk about epigenetics, what does that mean? And how can your environment affect what's getting produced in your body? And so when you're thinking happy thoughts, when you're thinking and having that elevated emotion, there are different neurochemicals that are being released from the brain that are circulating in your body. If you're in fight or flight, right? Oh my God, there's a hurricane coming, whatever it might be. The bear broke down the door, or the moose, if you're in Alaska, or whatever it is, and you go into fight or flight, you know, your adrenal glands kick in, you get adrenaline, you get all these chemicals that happen that circulate in your body. And if that goes on for extended periods of time, I don't know exactly what that might mean, but it changes your biochemistry. It changes what's being released in your body. And as that is happening, oh, well, then that changes what happens to that DNA, right? So it's just important to notice what your environment is. And your environment is just not what's outside your house. Your environment is what you're thinking, how you're being. So Dr. Joe talks a lot about having your thoughts and your intentions and having this elevated emotion. So for practitioners in religious science, we want, when we're doing treatment work, we're going to pull up that elevated emotion. We are going to be in that most holy wholeness place for knowing the spiritual truth and the spiritual essence. What is not reflected perhaps in current circumstances But we need to be in that place to be able to go to a place of elevated emotion, opening up in our heart center, shifting in our brain waves, and taking us into this elevated emotion place. See how that fits together? I hope this isn't too confusing. So again, Dr. Joe, and this is from either Breaking the Habit or from, it's from his most recent book, Becoming Superhuman, right? Supernatural. So, and talking about shifting and how as we shift and go into a different frequency, into a different strata, that things are shifting and changing. He says that everything starts from a conscious thought. As conscious thought slows down in frequency, it slows down in energy until ultimately it takes on form and becomes matter. You know, you've heard, I'm sure you've heard, that everything is from the invisible first, right? It's created in the invisible. And I have something to talk about quantum mechanics, So at the frequency of the speed of light, the pattern of all matter is reflected as a template to become structure. It is at the speed of light that energy divides into polarity or duality, and electrons and positrons are created. So from the invisible, higher frequency, slows down in vibration until it becomes matter. So in quantum physics, there's that idea of particle and wave, and saying that things either or, and some quantum physicists are going to say, well, it's both at the same time. For ease and understanding, I think we can say that things are in the waveform until the idea hits, and then it becomes particle, it becomes matter, it starts to get that slower wavelength and comes into manifestation. So here's a cartoon for that. The photon doesn't know whether it's a particle or a wave. Oh, am I an X-ray photon or a radio photon or visible? Yeah, there are infinite possibilities. And it takes thought to have the image to get it to go into this slower vibration, have the particle come together. So here's the second part of that. Here are his eyeballs up here, right? And then he's going through, and he says, oh hell, why worry about all that again? I'm not even sure if I'm a wave or a particle, right? I mean, it's just that idea is so different from biology that we may have learned in school. But just to know that these are the mechanics, if you will, behind manifestation. Yeah. And so Dr. Joe talks a lot about that. What I like to do is this is one of my favorite slides. I use this often in Sunday talks, to remember your highest expression, because it's real easy to look at yourself in the mirror, look at somebody else and just see that physical form. But the truth of who we are is we are spiritual beings, right? And to know that we are this energy. We're the energy of God. So I like to just put that any time I can, because I think it just really helps to say, yeah, I'm this energy field. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the wavelength is slowed down enough that you can see this form. Right. So when you maintain this and sustain elevated emotional states independent of the conditions of your external environment, you can gain access to the kind of high-level intuition that fosters a better understanding of yourself and others. It helps prevent stressful patterns in your life, increases mental clarity, and promotes better decision making. This man is full of information. So he even goes deeper than this, talking about thoughts. He goes into, in meditations, activating the pineal gland, the sixth chakra, if you will, and talks about the pineal gland being shaped like a pine cone and how it opens up. Now, in religious science, in my experience, we talk about affirmative prayer treatment as projecting information out. But we also know from our religious science training, if yours was like mine, that you are always tuning in to the vibration of what was called then race mind. I don't like that term, but human race, that we are not just sending information out. We're a vibration, and our vibration is always going out, right? But we're also receiving. And so Dr. Joe in these meditations talking about the pineal gland and using our breath and doing breath work to open up the channels of communication. So in his latest book, he talks about how when we do these certain breath work and activate things, that what we're actually doing is sending out the signals and sending out our energy, and it goes and it creates this negative positive flow that makes us a magnet. So I tell you, talking about Dr. Joe and what he has achieved and what he's teaching in a few minutes is okay. So he also talks about everything exists in the quantum. It's all there. Everything absolutely exists. So if you think about the Big Bang and you think about particle and wave, and you think about anything that you can think up, the potential is there to have it go from wave to particle and come into manifestation.
Right.
And as we shift and we start doing the work and we keep saying, okay, I'm going to hold the vision, and we shift in our vibration, we make room for it to show up in our lives. We do the work to sustain the vibration that we are sending out. We are that magnet to attract to us exactly what that is in form. It's the way the universe works. So another picture from the book, cycle of thinking and feeling, this thing that goes around and around and around. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to take ourselves to be in this elevated emotion? And it's by becoming aware of who you are, what your thoughts are, what your actions are. And Mike Dooley says, you can have these moments of fear and grief and all of that kind of stuff, and they're not nearly as powerful as being in love, being in that vibration for, a minute or two, will probably wipe out any of this lower vibration. And I believe, because we are these energy bundles here, that our divine inheritance is this joy and peace and love that's vibrating within us all the time. We've just kind of put blockages in there, so we don't really feel them all the time. We have to direct our attention towards them to have that be the predominant vibration. So, and Abraham Hicks talks a lot about the predominant vibration and being in that place. So we're really blessed that we have so many fantastic speakers and teachers that are reminding us that we are these creative beings, that we have this energy, we are this energy, and how powerful we are. We weren't trained, most of us, we're not trained and given the idea that we were these divine beings, that we were one with God. We weren't. And so Dr. Joe uses a little bit different terminology, but it's not that far of it's just like a half a step, it's not even a full step. But he goes so much deeper, and there's so much more that he talks about. And I know when people say, oh, meditate for 20 minutes. Well, I think if you've heard anything about Dr. Joe doing a meditation, that, what do you mean you start at 6 o'clock in the morning and you get out at 8 o'clock at night? Yeah, that's how these events go. And I am not an early morning person. No. So that just plays havoc with my schedule. But to go deep, to be in one of these events where you have over 1,000 people meditating together is absolutely can be life-changing. That you to experience, it is just truly heart-opening. And people just walk around and they're kind of, you say, boy, you're really spaced out. And that's true, because we shift, we go into a different place. And Dr. Joe says that most people are thinking the same thought today that they thought yesterday. 90% of the thoughts are the same. And if your thoughts are the same, and a belief is a thought you keep saying over and over and over again, right? Or we got beliefs that we downloaded from our parents and teachers and things when we were little, and we didn't have a way to block them, right? But we have all this stuff, and then we continue with the same behavior, but we want a different life experience. It isn't going to happen.
Right.
You've got to be willing to give up and release what is not serving you or what is not congruent with the dream you have for living your highest and best life. So when people come to a Dr. Joe event, a lot of them anyway, it's because we want to feel those vibrations. We want to go to the unified field. We want to go to that place. I went there in the mid-70s under a hypnosis and didn't have the words to explain where I went. The therapist said, your subconscious has recall of every experience it ever has had, ever it will have. It's all there. And whatever she said, she was going to count to me. I was going to go to this place, and boom. The next thing I knew, I was in my mind, right? I was in this place, and she said, you can ask any question you have because all the answers are there.
Right.
And all I could feel was, I didn't have any questions. There were no questions. Everything was it just was. And it was right and perfect. And I couldn't think of anything. And then I was pissed off because I couldn't think of any. And so ever since then, I want to get back there. So yeah, it doesn't happen. There's some people, they'll just snap right in there like I did under hypnosis, but you just keep doing the work and you keep practicing. And as Dr. Joe says, it'll pay off.
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I do want to do 2 announcements if I can.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
You
All
did
right.
a beautiful job, right? Oh.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there's just so much that I just can't. All right. So I am going to be starting a book study group, and I'll make sure that Reverend Marianne has the information. I did announce it when I was doing the book study group for Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which we started last September and ended in December. And I announced it through Eventbrite, and we got hacked, much like you guys got hacked in this past week. And it was horrible. So I've decided never to just broadcast any links to anything in that we're going to do with Zoom, because it was just really horrible. So I will send this out so that you know. I thought it was going to start in mid-January. I'm going to start it probably on Thursday, February the 3rd, and it's free.
Okay.
You know, it's free, and we meet for about an hour, and we go a chapter at a time through the book. You have questions, you have highlights you want to point out. It's going to be a nice closed, you know, it's not hundreds of people. So people are able to get to know other people who enjoy Dr. Joe and want to learn more about it. But if you're like me, yes, I'm going to read the book, and you start reading it, and then something else comes down the path, and then you go do that, and then, well, there's this over here, and there's this over there. I got all the way through Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Dun, dun, dun. And yes, I started Becoming Supernatural when I first got it a couple of years ago, and no, I haven't read the whole book. But yeah, so this will be an opportunity for those who want to go through the book, be in the company of other people who are interested, that I will make sure that you have the information. Ta-da! Announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, totally different, is that I last year decided I wanted to travel, but it wasn't going to be safe to travel for a while. So anyway, I did put together 2 groups, and they're happening in 2022. The first one is a New England cruise. It's going to leave from Boston, going to Montreal, May 28th through June 4th. And putting the group together meant it locked in the fares over a year ago. So that helps us out. And we've got several cabins that are booked in the group. I think there's still some cabins available. If somebody wants to travel and says, that sounds like a great thing, and I want to be with some other people who are of like mind, here's a great opportunity. And then the other one is the Rhine River Cruise. It starts in Basel, Switzerland, and goes all the way up to Amsterdam, and that's going to happen in August. So if people are interested and want to travel with some other like-minded people, you like to travel, but you don't want to do it by yourself, you know, whatever it is, I have those 2 things in the works. And whoops, one more thing. Sorry about that. I am going to have a workshop, and it's on Sunday, the 30th of January, about charting a successful course for 2022 with a focus on building a good foundation for your vision board. What do you need to do? You need to know you have to have a good I am statement.